Did you know that despite 13 interest rate hikes in just 2 years, inflation in Australia is still sitting well above 4%? At the same time, economic growth has slowed to a crawl, and unemployment is starting to tick up. These aren't just random numbers. They're the early warning signs of something much more dangerous: stagflation. A word we haven't heard seriously since the chaos of the 1970s. Until now, imagine this: prices are rising, but your income isn't. Jobs are drying up, but the cost of everything from groceries to rent keeps going higher. And worse, the usual tools used to fix the economy just don't work. It's like the system is broken, and economists are beginning to panic. Could Australia be sleepwalking into the same economic nightmare that once crippled countries like the US and UK? In this video, we're breaking down 10 clear reasons why many experts believe stagflation is already on Australia's doorstep. The signs are everywhere, you just have to know where to look. Stick with us to the end, because what you learn here might change the way you think about the next 12 months. Forever. Number 1. Sticky inflation despite rate hikes. For over 2 years, the Reserve Bank of Australia has been aggressively raising interest rates, hoping to cool down inflation. In theory, this should work. Higher rates make borrowing more expensive, which slows down spending and investment, eventually bringing prices back under control. But here's the problem: it's not working fast enough. Despite repeated hikes, core inflation is still hovering above 4%, well beyond the RBA's target range. Everyday Australians are feeling it at the supermarket, at the petrol pump, and especially in their rent payments. It's like fighting a bushfire with a garden hose. No matter how much water you pour, the flames keep spreading. What's even more alarming is that some prices aren't just rising, they're becoming entrenched. These are called sticky prices, costs that remain high even after inflation pressure eases. Think insurance premiums, childcare, education, and utilities. Once these go up, they rarely come back down. Economists are now warning that this could be the beginning of a wage price spiral, where workers demand higher wages to keep up with rising costs, which in turn forces businesses to raise prices even further. It's a vicious cycle, and one we last saw during the 1970s stagflation era. So why isn't inflation falling as expected? Because not all inflation is driven by local demand. Global supply shocks, energy costs, and structural issues within Australia's economy are all playing a role, and interest rates alone can't fix that. This is the first and perhaps most important reason why stagflation might not just be a possibility, but an inevitability. Number 2. Weak wage growth. While prices continue to soar, Australian wages have barely moved. On paper, average wages have gone up slightly, but when you factor in inflation, most people are actually earning less in real terms than they did a year ago. That's right, you might be working just as hard or harder, but your purchasing power is shrinking. This disconnect between wages and inflation is a critical piece of the stagflation puzzle. When prices rise but incomes don't keep up, consumer spending slows down. People cut back on non-essentials, avoid big purchases, and delay financial commitments. And when that happens across an entire economy, growth stalls. Even more concerning is that this isn't just a temporary blip. According to data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, real wages have been falling for 9 straight quarters. That's the longest decline in over a decade. And while some industries, like mining or tech, might still be offering pay rises, the majority of workers in retail, hospitality, education, and healthcare are barely treading water. Now add to this rising discontent. We're seeing early signs of industrial action, strike threats, and public sector unrest, very similar to what happened in the 1970s. Back then, unions gained power, wages were forcefully pushed up, and inflation spun even further out of control. It's a fragile balance. If wages stay low, households suffer. But if they rise too fast, they could fuel inflation even more. That's the catch-22 of stagflation, and it's exactly where Australia seems to be heading. Number 3. Housing market strain. Australia's housing market has long been a pillar of the economy, but now, it's starting to show serious cracks. After years of skyrocketing property prices, we're seeing a dangerous shift. Interest rate hikes have pushed mortgage repayments to record highs, and many households are now spending over 40% of their income just to stay in their homes. That's mortgage stress, and it's spreading fast. First-time buyers are being priced out entirely, while existing homeowners are barely holding on. Meanwhile, the property investment sector has cooled dramatically. Fewer new developments, lower investor confidence, and rising rental vacancies in some areas are clear signs of a market losing momentum. But this isn't just about property prices. The housing market in Australia is deeply tied to consumer confidence. When people feel rich thanks to rising home values, they spend more. But when prices drop or repayments skyrocket, people tighten their belts, spend less, and delay big purchases. That ripples across the whole economy. And here's where the stagflation risk grows. If the housing market crashes or even stagnates while inflation remains high, we end up in a no-win situation. People's wealth shrinks, spending dries up, construction slows, and yet the cost of living keeps rising. Historically, housing has helped pull Australia out of downturns. But this time, it could do the opposite. The market is too inflated, debt levels are too high, and rates are too punishing. We're witnessing a housing sector that's no longer boosting the economy. It's quietly dragging it down. Number 4. Global commodity shock. Australia may be rich in natural resources, but that doesn't make us immune to global price shocks, especially when it comes to energy and commodities. Right now, we're seeing serious volatility in global oil, gas, and food prices. Wars, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical instability, from Ukraine to the Middle East, are pushing the costs of raw materials through the roof. Even though Australia exports coal, gas, and iron ore, we're still a price taker in global markets. That means we don't control the price. We simply sell at whatever the world's willing to pay. And when global prices spike, we feel the pain right here at home, from fuel stations to electricity bills. Sound familiar? It should. Back in the 1970s, the world was rocked by a major oil crisis. Prices quadrupled almost overnight, fueling inflation across developed economies. And just like then, today's supply shocks are starting to show the same signs. Rising transport costs, expensive food imports, and increased manufacturing expenses. These shocks trickle down into every corner of the economy. Farmers pay more for fuel. Supermarkets raise prices. Logistics companies pass on costs. It's an invisible chain reaction that causes across-the-board inflation, even if domestic demand is slowing. The worst part? Australia can't fix this alone. Global commodity inflation is out of our hands, and yet we pay the price. If international tensions keep escalating, and supply chains remain fragile, we could be in for prolonged price instability, the perfect storm for stagflation. And unlike normal inflation, you can't raise interest rates to solve a supply shock. That's what makes this so dangerous. Number 5. China's slowdown. For the past 2 decades, China has been Australia's economic engine, our biggest trading partner, largest export market, and a major source of global demand. But now that engine is losing steam. China's economy is facing serious headwinds. A property crisis, weakening consumer confidence, declining exports, and rising youth unemployment. Their post-COVID recovery has been slower than expected, and the ripple effects are starting to reach our shores. Why? Because when China slows down, Australia gets hit hard. We rely on China to buy iron ore, coal, gas, and agricultural products. These industries don't just support our GDP, they support thousands of jobs and entire regional economies. A drop in Chinese demand means lower export income, falling business profits, and reduced tax revenue for the government. But it gets worse. When export volumes drop, the Australian dollar often weakens, making imported goods more expensive, adding yet another layer to inflation. So we end up with higher prices but less money flowing into the country. That's classic stagflation material. This isn't just a theory, it's already happening. Major mining companies have started to revise forecasts. Investment in new projects is slowing. And if China's growth continues to stall, the flow-on effects could drag Australia's economy further down, even as living costs stay painfully high. In the 1970s, stagflation was partly triggered by external shocks. This time, one of the biggest shocks may be coming quietly from a slowing Chinese giant. We pour hours of research and care into these videos to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. If you got value from this, Please smash that like button, drop a comment, we read everyone, and hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. Number 6. High household debt. Australia has one of the highest household debt levels in the developed world, over 180% of disposable income, according to the RBA. That means for every dollar Australians earn, many owe nearly two. Most of this debt is tied to mortgages, thanks to decades of rising property prices and easy credit. But here's the catch. Now that interest rates have surged, those same debts have become painfully expensive. Monthly mortgage repayments have doubled or even tripled for some households. Credit card debt, car loans, and personal loans are also weighing heavily on family budgets. When people are drowning in debt, they don't spend. They cut back, save what little they can, and hold off on everything from holidays to home repairs. That's bad news for small businesses, retail, construction, and hospitality sectors that rely heavily on consumer demand. This is a silent drag on the economy. It doesn't grab headlines like inflation or unemployment, but it's a major reason why economic growth is stalling. And here's the problem. If the RBA keeps rates high to fight inflation, it squeezes households even harder. But if they lower rates, inflation could flare up again. That's the stagflation trap. And unlike government or corporate debt, households can't print money or restructure. They just have to pay or default. Rising arrears and mortgage stress levels are already showing up in the data. If this trend worsens, we could see a wave of financial instability. In short, the weight of household debt is becoming a brick tied to the ankle of the Australian economy, dragging it deeper into stagflation waters. Number 7. Business confidence falling. In any healthy economy, business confidence is a vital sign. When businesses feel optimistic, they hire more, invest in growth, and innovate. But right now, across Australia, that confidence is slipping fast, and the consequences are already being felt. Recent surveys by NAB and the Australian Chamber of Commerce show that business sentiment has taken a sharp dive. Companies are worried about high operating costs, rising wages, and unpredictable demand. The result? Hiring freezes, delayed investments, and a wave of cost-cutting strategies across industries. This kind of cautious behavior can quickly become a self-fulfilling prophecy. When businesses hold back, job creation slows, fewer people get pay rises, and consumer demand weakens. That reduced demand makes businesses even more cautious. It's a feedback loop, and it's textbook stagflation. Small and medium enterprises, SMEs, which employ nearly half of Australia's workforce, are particularly vulnerable. With shrinking profit margins and higher borrowing costs, many are barely staying afloat. Some are choosing to scale back operations or shut down altogether. Worse still, sectors like construction, retail, and hospitality are already seeing a drop in forward orders. A clear warning sign that business owners expect tougher times ahead. When business confidence collapses, the economy doesn't just slow, it stalls. Growth flatlines, productivity dips, and the overall economic environment becomes risk-averse. And in that kind of setting, it's nearly impossible to fight off inflation without doing even more damage. Australia needs its businesses to thrive, but right now, too many are simply trying to survive. That's yet another sign that stagflation isn't just knocking at the door, it might already be inside. Number 8. Government spending constraints. In times of economic stress, governments usually step in with stimulus spending, cash handouts, infrastructure projects, tax relief, to keep the economy afloat. But this time around, Australia's government is walking a financial tightrope. After years of pandemic spending, natural disaster relief, and rising interest payments on national debt, the budget is stretched thin. The federal government is under intense pressure to cut spending to avoid adding to inflation. But that's where the dilemma kicks in. If the government pulls back too much, it risks deepening the slowdown. If it spends too freely, it could pour fuel on the inflation fire. This limited room to maneuver is one of the key features of stagflation. Traditional fiscal tools don't work the way they used to. In fact, both monetary and fiscal policy are now trapped, unable to act boldly without triggering serious side effects. You've probably already felt this shift. Fewer grants, stricter eligibility for support payments, delayed infrastructure, and even funding cuts to essential services. These may seem like isolated decisions, but together they signal a government that's being forced to hold back at exactly the moment when stimulus is needed most. And remember, public spending often kickstarts private sector activity. When that flow slows down, businesses and consumers hesitate. That hesitation spreads, and the economy stalls. The scary part? This is how recessions drag on longer than they should. When both the private and public sectors are squeezed, recovery becomes painfully slow. It's another crucial sign that stagflation isn't just coming. It's already reshaping how our economy operates. Number 9. Demographic drag. Behind the charts and headlines, there's a slower, quieter force pulling on Australia's economy. Our aging population. It might not sound urgent, but this demographic shift is one of the most powerful long-term drivers of economic stagnation, and it's happening right now. Australia's population is getting older. Birth rates are falling and people are living longer. That means fewer working-age people supporting a growing number of retirees. The implications? Slower productivity, increased pressure on health and pension systems, and reduced consumer demand in key sectors like housing, travel, and retail. This isn't just a future problem. It's already affecting the workforce. Labor shortages are emerging in healthcare, education, and skilled trades, while experienced professionals are retiring faster than we can replace them. Less productivity means slower growth, even as costs keep rising. Japan has been battling this issue for decades, and the outcome has been years of economic stagnation despite massive stimulus. Now, economists are warning that Australia is heading down a similar path, unless drastic action is taken. An older population also spends differently. They're less likely to buy new homes, take out loans, or start new businesses. And as consumer behavior changes, economic momentum fades. This shifts the entire dynamic of growth. And when you mix it with inflation and falling productivity, stagflation becomes much harder to escape. Demographics are destiny, as the saying goes. And unless immigration, workforce participation, and productivity improve significantly, Australia could be dragged into a slow-growth era that no interest rate cut or stimulus package can fix. Number 10. Lagging productivity growth. At the heart of any thriving economy lies one key factor: productivity. It's the measure of how efficiently we turn labor and resources into goods and services. But here's the harsh truth. Australia's productivity growth has flatlined, and without it, economic progress grinds to a halt. According to the Productivity Commission, Australia has experienced its worst productivity slump in 60 years. Output per hour worked is barely rising, and in some sectors it's actually going backward. That means businesses are paying more for labor, materials, and energy, but getting less in return. In short, we're working harder but not smarter. This creates a dangerous economic trap. When productivity stalls, wages can't sustainably rise, and any attempts to lift pay often just fuel more inflation. Meanwhile, businesses face rising costs without the growth to offset them. So they either cut jobs, raise prices, or both. Low productivity also makes it harder to absorb economic shocks. In high-performing economies, innovation and efficiency help cushion downturns. But in Australia, that cushion is wearing thin. Investment in technology, infrastructure, and education, the pillars of future productivity, has been inconsistent and, in many areas, underfunded. Stagflation becomes a real threat when an economy has rising costs but no growth engine to counterbalance them. And that's exactly what lagging productivity represents. A stalled engine in a car already losing speed. If Australia can't reverse this trend, no amount of stimulus or interest rate adjustment will be enough. Productivity is the long-term cure, but without it, we may be stuck in a cycle of low growth and high prices for years to come. Conclusion. So, there you have it, 10 powerful reasons why Australia may be standing at the edge of a stagflation storm. From sticky inflation and stagnant wages to global shocks and an aging workforce, the warning signs aren't just theoretical, they're happening right now. And what makes stagflation so dangerous is that it doesn't play by the usual economic rules. You can't just raise rates or spend your way out. It's a trap, and escaping it takes bold, long-term thinking. But this video isn't just about doom and gloom. It's about awareness. Because the more we understand what's happening, the better we can prepare. Financially, mentally, and politically. Whether it's adjusting your household budget, planning your investments, or demanding smarter policy, knowledge is your best defense. The 1970s taught us how quickly things can spiral. Let's not repeat those mistakes.